Hey guys, what's up? This is Conan the Barbarian, the movie from 1982, and this is the Arnold Schwarzenegger one. And they did two of these. One of them was Conan the Barbarian, one of them was Conan the Destroyer. Conan the Barbarian was good. Conan the Destroyer was a disappointment because people really expected Conan the Barbarian 2 to be as good as the first one. And you know what happens with sequels is that the second one's never as good as the first one. And this is the DVD set of both of them, which is pretty cool. And on the inside, there's not really much. They don't give you anything on the inside. It does have a really cool, it sort of has here where you've got the shots from the movie. I'll show you some of those. And they have that on the inside of the DVD thing. So I don't know, like, they should have put something else in here because like they've got this like little flap in here, and the flap looks like there should be like a pamphlet that goes in there. Actually, nothing goes in here, or nothing went in there when I got the disc. And this is just one disc for both movies. Look at that thing, like look at that thing reflect. It's one disc for both movies. As you can see, like on the other side of the thing is also more like stuff. You got like the guy that played the bad guy, what's his name, Uther, whatever that guy, Uma something, whatever his name was. And so yeah, so this is actually the first one, Conan the Barbarian, is actually a really good movie because back in 82, when that came out, nobody thought it was going to be good because there were a lot of B movies that came out that were like that, and it fit it fit the kind of image of a B movie. People are like, Schwarzenegger's a B actor, he's nobody, he's just a, you know, nobody thought Schwarzenegger was any good at acting and anything, right? So it felt like they had, you know, like a B actor. It felt like a B movie because at the time, things like movies like Conan the Barbarian or like all those fantasy movies that came out at the time, most of them were really bad. There wasn't any big fantasy blockbusters that came out. You know, there were some science fiction blockbusters that came out, but there weren't any fantasy blockbusters that came out. There weren't no like kind of sword and sorcery fantasy big hits like that came out in the theater ever at that time. And so when you actually watch the movie, you're like, wait a minute, this was good. This was actually good. Arnold was a good character, like he was a good actor in it. The story was like really interesting. It was well written. It was well directed. The guy that directed it, Milius something, he was a great director at the time. And so you were like, wait a minute. And it surprised like everybody, because absolutely nobody thought it was going to be good, but people watched it anyway. Because back in the day, when there's a fantasy movie that came out like that, you're going to watch it because fantasy was cool. Fantasy still is cool, and a fantasy like Conan the Barbarian with just like swords and, you know, guys like hacking away with swords and monsters, that's actually really cool. That's actually all cool. And even though there weren't any big blockbuster hits at the time, and this was like the first one, people still watched them because they were cool. Like they would watch horror movies like Friday the 13th. They weren't good. None of them were good. There was like 20 different Friday the 13ths and none of them were that good. But people just liked the whole ride of it, and people liked to see it because it was fun. And that's what this movie was. It was just fun. It cost, according to what it says on the disc in the bio, it cost them $20 million to make the movie. And it got $71 million in the box office, which is like not counting like DVDs and streaming and all of the other licenses and merch and products that came out. Because there were like Conan the Barbarian swords came out, and there's lots of there were shirts and there were clothing that came out from that. So it was a ton of stuff, but it made 68 to 71 million at the box office just during the release. So that's actually really good. It did really, really well, especially that Arnold Schwarzenegger was not known by anybody. Nobody knew who he was at the time, and nobody was into bodybuilding at the time. Very, very few people were. Some people were into bodybuilding, but it wasn't common like it is today, where it's common to, you know, see people that are just like, they go to the gym a lot, you know, and are bodybuilders. So that one came out, it was awesome. And then the second one came out a few years later, and it was, to be fair, it wasn't a bad movie, but it was like the B movie that you expected Conan to be, the first one to be. It was the B movie. They ended up making the B movie anyway. You know, they ended up making it, but they made it Conan the Destroyer. Their sequel, they made that a real B movie. Because it was like, it was okay, but you could watch it, but it's not like, you're not going to really like it a lot, and it's not going to be that memorable, and you're not going to want to watch it too many times. You know, whereas Conan the Barbarian, the movie was good, the soundtrack was good, it was well directed, and it was really done really well. Even though Arnold Schwarzenegger was not like a well-known actor, he was perfect for the role because like he's Austrian and the barbarians came from that part of Europe, that Austrian area where you had like the Vikings and the barbarians and all those like, you know, like clans of people and sects of people. At the time, at the medieval like Iron Age and Steel Age, when barbarians were around, they were from the same area as Arnold Schwarzenegger was born. So Arnold Schwarzenegger is actually very, very highly likely a descendant of barbarians, making him a barbarian. So he was actually a real barbarian. You know, they put a real barbarian in the story. So that's why his accent kind of worked. Because, well, what did barbarians sound like? Well, they were these like European sort of like Austrian tribes. And they actually sounded like that. They had that kind of accent. So they sounded like Arnold and everything like that. And he was like, Conan was buffed and built, right? He was built. It was perfect. He was perfect for the role. What's also cool about it was that he actually ended up being a good actor, and actually Arnold Schwarzenegger was studying acting, you know, in addition to bodybuilding and being in like bodybuilding tournaments and trying to win the bodybuilding championships and all that, professional bodybuilding. He actually, at night, he went to acting school for years before he actually became an actor. And this movie really put him on the map. And I don't think this movie like put him on the map as much. Like people are like, wow, he was good in this movie, right? But the thing is, the Conan the character, Conan the Barbarian, the character was perfect for him to play. Because he was Conan the Barbarian. You know, he looked like Conan, he sounded like Conan. You know, he was from the same place as Conan was, you know, historically. He was Conan the Barbarian. It wasn't until his next movie came out, which was just as big of a blockbuster, called The Terminator, that people said, okay, this guy's good. But look at The Terminator. What kind of acting was actually required for The Terminator? Like, very little. The Terminator was just like, as long as you could like, he didn't talk a lot. It was all action. And he just had to like, you know, be all straight-faced and say his line. You know, so it was like, actually Conan the Barbarian took a lot more acting than The Terminator. However, doing like having that on your resume, Conan the Barbarian and then The Terminator, two big hit movies like that, one after the other, the biggest movies at the time, and he was in both of them. There's very, very few actors that were in multiple hit movies that came out at that time, and he was one of them. Or he was like maybe one of the few. There might be a few actors that were popular at the time, but he was one of them. And he was new, he was good, and that just made his career, that just took his career off. So every movie that he came out with after that was him playing, they liked his accent, they liked how it looked, they liked that he was a bodybuilder, they liked his build, and also they liked the fact that he could do sci-fi and fantasy. So he did a lot of like fantasy sci-fi genres after that. First movie was fantasy, Conan, second one was Terminator sci-fi, you know, and so he basically said, I can play fantasy, I can play sci-fi, and bam, he was into it. And so like, so yeah, so what I like about the disc is it's got both movies so that you can watch one, which is worth watching. The other one, it's worth watching once or twice, but you're not gonna wanna watch it too many times after that. And that's cool, and it's on one disc, which is nice because you don't have like multiple discs of this movie. Because they have two discs, you have to keep track of two discs. it's like, it's a lot easier to store it. Like if you can fit on one disc, let it fit on one disc, you know? It's a lot easier to store it. I like the inside cover of it. I don't like the fact that this would be cool if there was an insert like this, so you could take it out and maybe like put it up as art on your wall or something if you wanted to, or put it up in like your, your TV room or somewhere where you watch movies or show movies or invite people to watch movies. That would be cool because it would look good on a TV room or something like that. However, it's like you can't get it out. The cover isn't good at all. I mean, the actual original poster was good, but this cover is not good. It's just a photo of Arnold, and it's got, the rest of it is just very, very plain, and it's not really too much to look at. So they don't give you a lot of art with this. Interesting enough, I found this out very, very recently, that Boris Vallejo did the art for Conan the Barbarian. He did that one. I don't know if he did the Conan the Destroyer art, but Conan the Barbarian art was better. So all of that art that you saw, the costumes from Thulsa Doom, the towers, the outfits, all of the snake looking like symbols that all like the two snakes looking at each other. A lot of the artwork in Conan was done by Boris Vallejo, which makes sense because he's one of the greatest fantasy artists of all time, I think, and in the present time, definitely one of the greatest. And his artwork is just amazing. Like, it's just amazing. You cannot compare it to anybody else because it just stands alone, and it's amazing, amazing artwork. So I found that out. And then John Milius, I think the guy's name is John Milius or something like that, is the director, and I think he did Apocalypse Now. And then like what he's good about, he really directed it well. Like, it was dangerous. Like that movie was shot so dangerously, right? That movie, people got hurt, people fell off horses. Arnold like fell from a mountain, like he was into a pit or something like that. He was doing a scene and then he slips and falls and he fell like 10 feet onto his back. And then the director's like, "Oh, okay, get up. We got, it looks realistic now. We got the scene." Like, so that like anything for a realistic scene, they were into it. They were doing it. They were giving it their all. Like they were like, the sword fights were dangerous. People got hurt during those sword fights. People got really, really hurt with the swords and then they got like these samurai guys who are like, I don't know if they are samurai or they train samurais or they like train in the tradition of samurais, but basically you got these samurais or these people that are into the whole samurai swordsmanship, teaching them how to like swing a sword, how to like hit with a sword, how to hold a sword, how to look when you strike with a sword and stuff like that. So that's why all the swords, the swordsmanship looked really good. The soundtrack was great, and it's still good now. You can listen to it stand alone, and it's got that heroic like soundtrack of, it's like dun, 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 it's that heroic like Flight of the Valkyries kind of like symphonic sort of like inspired by classical music soundtrack, where it just felt like dun, like it was like the Dune soundtrack was like dun 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 dun, and then it was like, so it was a little bit different, but it just felt that way. It felt like it was just like heroic music. It felt like the backdrop music to a heroic movie. Like when something heroic is happening, that the music that they play, dun dun dun, dun dun, that heroic music, that was perfect for this movie. So the music was great. The acting was great. They got a couple. The only actor besides Arnold, there was a couple actually actors that were professional actors. But then they got the guy that played Thulsa Doom, which I forget his name, but the guy that played Thulsa Doom, this dude, he's a professional. Like he was a real professional actor. And honestly, Thulsa Doom was such a bad guy in the movie. You hated him. You really hated him. You really wanted Conan to kick his ass, because he was really evil. He was really bad. Like he was like, he just like, he was merciless. He didn't care. He would just kill people for no reason. He was a real bad guy. Like, you hated him. he was such a good villain that you were like, I hope Conan takes that sword and kicks his ass, because you hate Thulsa Doom so much. And he turns into a snake, and they had like the scene where like turns into a snake, like he's just hanging out and everything, and they're having their like, yeah, him and his whole cult were having their party, you know, but they were like cannibals. So they were having their cannibalistic party where they were like cooking people and putting them in this green soup, and there were like parts of people in the green soup and shit and stuff like that. And so, and like people are eating the people from the soup, and it's disgusting. And it was like, but it wasn't like, they didn't do that a lot. They just showed how evil that cult was and how they were all being controlled by Thulsa Doom. And then basically it was Thulsa Doom and his two like lackeys, those two guys, they were the other bodybuilders in it. Like those guys were badass also, because he's got his two like main warriors, and they were, I think they were like from like the same gym as Arnold was exercising in or bodybuilding in, because they were also bodybuilders. So they didn't just get Arnold, they got those two other guys, and they were like tall, big. They were also like Austrian or like European or something like that. They had that vibe. And they were also like barbarians and stuff, because it was just a lot of barbarians in the movie. And they were like, they had these helmets, but they had like real like helmets, weapons. They were like, you know, they were real like warriors and stuff like that. They would protect Thulsa Doom, because Thulsa Doom was basically a wizard more than anything else. He was like, he would hypnotize people. Like he would hypnotize people, and then he would just kill them, because that's what he does. And so he hypnotizes this whole cult of the snake, this snake cult, and he just like starts taking over the world with the snake cult, and initiates more and more people to follow him in this like snake cult. But of course, Conan's got his like gripe with him. He's like, no, I'm gonna find him, I'm gonna kill him, like, you know. And so Conan was like, you know, so it was just cool, and Conan was so likable. Like he was a barbarian, but you could tell like he was a good guy. Like he didn't do anything bad to people. He was good. He was like, he had a heart, you know, like he was like, he was not like a bad person. I mean, even though like he started off, he was badass and you wouldn't want to mess with him, and you know, he was strong, but that's the character of Conan. Like he wasn't evil, and he was just like basically trying to conquer. The whole thing was, I mean, he wasn't like a bad person. Like he fell in love, he wanted to fall in love, he had friends. He had this friend that he saved from, he was all chained up waiting for wolves to like eat him, and then he actually saved him. He like saved him from the wolves, and then he met this other woman who's like a thief, and he falls in love with her. The guy takes him to a city, and it's like the first city he's ever seen, and then he was like, at first he was like, they trained him to fight, and that's all he did, and then, you know, they basically got rid of him. They told him to, you know, they told him, you know, to go away, whatever. And so he was on his own, and he's on his own, and he finds this sword, and it's like from this like this old king that was just like his burial chamber, and like this old king, and then the old king has a sword next to him, and Conan, like, he's being chased by wolves, and he like falls into this like hole, and he sees this old like, you know, this king, this like with a sword, and he takes the sword and he keeps the sword and stuff like that. And so he comes out there, and he's like, he says, you know, he just says whatever, he's looking for Thulsa Doom, he's gonna kick his ass. And that's kind of like the whole movie, but that's kind of like what Conan's about. Conan's all about the swordsmanship, the fighting, the big hulking barbarians, you know, like it's about fantasy and swords and sorcery and stuff like that. He makes friends with a sorcerer, and then this king tells him, you know what, we want to, like, you have to save my daughter from Thulsa Doom. And that's when Conan realizes, okay, Thulsa Doom is the guy that he's after. Because he's after that guy because Thulsa Doom destroyed his village, killed his people. It was like horrible, you know, and basically destroyed everything, enslaved him, and then like when they enslaved him, they basically got him all pumped up, and then put him in the pits to fight other slaves, and they were like kind of betting on who was going to win and stuff like that. And then like one day his basically his master, his owner or whatever, said, no, you're free, like, go. And then like basically got rid of it, said, just go. And so he runs away, he runs from there, and that's where he like falls into this pit, gets like chased by wolves, finds his sword, saves his friend, meets up with a girl that later like he falls in love with, and they fall in love with each other in the city and stuff like that, and meets this king, and the king is like, no, that Thulsa Doom guy, who he didn't even know what his name was, but he just knew who he was. He was the head of the snake cult. And actually what's interesting about it is like, it's hard to get the whole plot when you first watch the movie, but then after you watch it a few times you get it. So anyway, and he gives them all of these gems, these like red jewels, and say, here, take all the jewels you want, I don't care about the jewels, save my daughter, right? And so Conan, his friend, and the girl who's a thief basically get sent to. They said, look, here's a bunch. He said, like the king said, look, here's a bunch of money, here's a bunch of jewels, and if you could save my daughter, I'll give you whatever jewels you want. So they were like, okay, whatever. So they were gonna do that because they're gonna save the daughter, get a bunch of jewels, and get rich. But Conan's like, no, I'm not just gonna save the daughter, I'm gonna kill Thulsa Doom, right? And so Conan is like, he's really just after Thulsa Doom. He wants to kill Thulsa Doom because Thulsa Doom destroyed his people, burned his village, destroyed everyone he knows. And so, but Thulsa Doom's not so easy. Like I don't think he was just a very old wizard who was just very, very powerful. And he had just a lot of people under his command, and you just don't get to Thulsa Doom. And so Conan basically was like, no, I'm gonna go. He was just gonna go and get Thulsa Doom and like, basically kick his ass. And so that's why that's kind of like, it's just like really interesting story. It makes sense. It's a revenge story, basically. It's a revenge story, and you really feel for Conan because you know how evil Thulsa Doom is, and you really feel for him, what he went through because of Thulsa Doom, and you were like, you're like totally on his side that he wants to get revenge on Thulsa Doom, and and basically kill him and stuff like, and so that's the whole movie, and there's so much other stuff in the movie. The scenes are great. It's just well acted, well written. Everything is good. The soundtrack, the art is by Boris Vallejo. It's amazing stuff. And for 1982, the special effects were really good. There was witches that turned to monsters. The special effects were really cool. The costumes, all the makeup, and everything was amazing. You got to see it if you haven't seen it. Don't worry too much about like Conan the Destroyer. If you want to see it, but I just want to, whoever didn't see Conan the Destroyer, I just want to say it's not like your hopes are up because you think it's the sequel to Conan the Barbarian, but it's not really that good. It's not satisfying at all. It's okay, like you can watch it once and be amused by it, but it's not anything close. It's not even the same movie. And I don't know why like his acting in Conan the Barbarian is so much better than his acting in Conan the Destroyer. Because his acting in Conan the Destroyer, probably because of lack of the direction and all of the stuff that they wrote for him isn't that good. Is just nowhere near. Like his acting is 100% better. He's at his best in Conan the Barbarian, and at Conan the Destroyer, I feel like they're just having fun, and they're not really taking it too seriously. Like the acting wasn't serious, the story wasn't serious. They weren't taking it seriously. They were just like, let's just have fun and make another movie. Whereas the Conan the Barbarian was like, no, this is serious. We're gonna make an amazing film. It's gonna be great. So yeah, so let me know what you guys think, if you've seen this movie or not, in the comments if you want. There's some special features here on the back and stuff that's not really anything. Some deleted scenes, but nothing that great. The original movie is the best thing you're gonna see out of it. Yeah, so thanks for watching. Hope you liked the video. Like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys in another video. Later.